Good morning, everyone. I'm going to give just one more minute for everyone to get logged on and settled in. Just a reminder, you can use the chat on the side on YouTube to send us any questions that you have during the program and let us know where you're watching from. And we will get started in just a second now. My name is Jade, and I'm an educator for inland fisheries and wildlife here in Maine. And today we are at the Maine Wildlife Park, which is in Gray, Maine. And here at the park, we have more than 30 species of native Maine wildlife. And today we're going to be talking about owls, but at the park, we have many different animals. We have bears and different cat species, moose, beavers, all different types of birds, reptiles. So you can come to the park, and you can also visit online on mainewildlifepark.com, and you can look at Inland Fisheries and Wildlife website at mefishwildlife.com to learn more about Maine's wildlife. Like I said, today we are going to be talking about owls and specific owl adaptations. First, I want to talk about just what an owl is. So owls are raptors. What characteristics make a bird a raptor? So raptors are birds of prey. They all eat meat. They eat other animals. Some of them, like vultures, usually eat animals that have already died. They're called carrion. They're scavengers that eat dead animals. And other raptors, other than vultures, will do this too, especially in times when food is scarce. But most of them are very, very well adapted for hunting prey. And owls are no exception. They are highly adapted for finding and hunting other small animals and small birds, small rodents, even sometimes amphibians and reptiles, or they can be insect eaters and they fly through the air and catch insects. So many different diets, but all of them are well adapted for hunting and finding prey. And we'll go over a few of those special adaptations now. So I have a couple different owl mounts here today, and we're going to look at these mounts to look at these different physical adaptations that are on these owls' bodies. So some of the first adaptations we'll look at for them to hunt their prey and find prey are their beaks. So I have on this snowy owl, and theirs is covered in these little feathers. And when we look on their feet also, they're very feathery. So owls, most of them have a little bit more of this like fluffy feather covering parts of their body than some of the other raptors. But snowy owls, especially because they live in very cold habitats for a lot of the year. So they have some extra plumage to help keep them warm and dry. And if we also look, I have a great horned owl here, and we'll look at this owl's beak as well. So they have this very sharp hooked beak for grabbing their prey and for eating their prey. And that goes for their talons as well. So if we look on his feet here, they have very sharp, strong talons and very strong muscles and tendons in their legs for grabbing and holding onto their prey when they catch them. Let's also check out this owl's eyes. All right, let's get him situated here so we can see his eyes. So owls, like other raptors, have very good eyesight. So they are locating small prey. They have binocular vision, which means their two eyes are facing forward, which is very common in predators. A lot of predators have vision like this for seeing their prey. And we'll talk more about the specifics of owl eyes later, but it's a very important adaptation for them to catch their prey. Also want to check out these wings. This is an awesome owl mount because they mounted their wings spread out so you can see how large these wings are. The feathers and the muscles and everything in these wings are going to help them fly. And we'll look closely later too at some of their special feather adaptations that are special for owls for catching their prey. Another special thing about raptors is that in a lot of the species, the females are larger than the males. And depending on the species, it could be a big size difference. And for some of them, it's a smaller size difference. But unlike mammals, a lot of raptors, the females are actually a little bit larger than the males. And that's because they carry the eggs. They often are doing most of the nesting and raising and like sitting on their nests. So their larger size helps have more heat and just a bigger body for carrying the egg until they lay it and then protecting that egg in the nest. Another thing about owls that is specific is that they are mostly nocturnal. So almost all owls are nocturnal, meaning that they are more active at night. Some of them are what we call crepuscular, and that means that they're more active at dusk and at dawn. So at the very early time in the morning and later in the evening, or they're nocturnal, so they're more active at night. So either nocturnal or crepuscular. And that is partly why they've adapted to have such good sense of eyesight, and also their hearing ability is so good. And it's because they're working the night shift. They are catching their prey and everything at night. So they need to have very good eyesight and very good sense of being able to hear in the nighttime conditions. And we'll take a look at their feathers a little bit closely here too. So owls have what we usually refer to as silent flight. So they can fly almost silently through the air. For most birds, like if we think of eagles and hawks, they're very, very good flyers. They are very well adapted for flying and catching their prey, sometimes from the air or from the ground. But owls have a unique adaptation that their feathers actually have a fringe. So it's like a looser connection down the ends of their feathers. So this here is an owl feather, and it's hard to tell on a camera. It's a little bit easier if you actually have an owl feather and you can look really closely at it. But I'll try and show you closely. The tips of the feathers have a more frayed, fringy end to them. Compared to, this is an eagle feather. And you can see how sharp and crisp the ends of the feathers are. So when this eagle takes off, it's gonna make this like whooshing sound. Like they're flying off and they take off, it's gonna make that whooshing kind of gushing air noise. Whereas the owls, like I said, are almost silent. They make nearly no noise when they take off. And that's because that fringe on the end of their feathers breaks up the air. So instead of being a big gush of wind, it breaks up the air across all their feathers and across their wings so they can fly so quietly. There's a fun activity you can do at home to hear this for yourself without having owl feathers. So if you take a section of rope and you leave one end bare, so this is just regular rope, and then on the other end, I've attached all these pieces of yarn. So along this end, there's yarn, and this is to show that fringed texture on the owl feathers. And then this would be the end that doesn't have fringed feathers. And then I would suggest doing this outside. I have lots of space in this room, so I'm not going to hit anything. But I would suggest doing it outside so you don't hit anything. And you just wave the rope in the air over your head or off to the side of you. And the end that doesn't have yarn on it, you can hear it. It sounds kind of like a helicopter. It makes that whooshing noise through the air. But when you swing the end that has the yarn, it's so quiet. Unfortunately, my microphone doesn't pick it up, so you can't hear it really well on the camera. But if you try this at home, you can hear the difference. And it helps you understand how those fringed feathers help the owls fly up on their prey. And that's especially important because these owls are hunting prey that have really, really good sense of hearing as well. So they're hunting a lot of small rodents, and they have big ears. They are really good at hearing. So the owls do not want them to hear them coming. All right. So we have a lot of different owl species here in Maine. I'm going to try and focus today mostly on the owls that we have here at the wildlife park. But we do have many different species here in Maine. And like I said, the majority of them are nocturnal. So a lot of people don't see owls or they don't know how many owls we have in Maine because most people are not nocturnal. So we're not out in the woods at night when these owls are, like I said, working the night shift. But they are out there and they're very active. And you might actually be able to hear them better than you can see them. Owls have many different types of calls. They don't all just hoo, because if they all just did that, then they wouldn't be able to communicate well with each other. So different species have different calls, and you can listen to a lot of these online. You can search different owl calls and you can learn them. So if you can't see them or you can't find them at night, you can still try and identify them by their different calls, and it can be really fun to learn. There's different examples of certain species that we think sound a certain way. We think that, I believe it's the barred owl that we think says something like, who cooks for you, who cooks for you. But you try listening for yourself and see what you think they sound like. And then at night, you can try and listen for these owls and try and figure out which species it is. So here at the park, we have a few different species of owl. The first one I'm going to talk about is the great horned owl. I'm going to get my great horned owl out here again. Let me back up a little bit so we're not staring directly into his face. So this is the example of the great horned owl again. We have two great horned owls at the wildlife park. And the owls that are here for a number of different reasons. The majority of them have wing injuries or nerve damage or partially missing parts of their wings. And most of them that is from being involved in a vehicle collision. So unfortunately, a lot of birds of prey are hit by vehicles each year, and that can really hurt them. And most of the birds of prey that are here at the park can't fly anymore. Sorry, lost my camera for a second. Okay, we're back. So most of the birds here at the park can't fly anymore because of those injuries. Some of them also have different sight problems. So like I was saying, they rely so heavily on their ability to see and their ability to fly. So as soon as they lose those abilities, they can't hunt their prey like they would in the wild anymore. So they come here and we help take care of them and we feed them and make sure that we have their exhibits set up so they can still move around safely without being able to fly. So great horned owls are one of the species you can find here in Maine and here at the wildlife park. And they get their name from these special feathers on their head. And over time, we have learned that these feathers aren't really there for helping them hear. They use them more for communicating and for displaying to each other. But many different species of owls do have these circular patterns of feathers on their heads, and that is to help them with their hearing. So the great horned owl doesn't have it quite as predominantly as owls like the barn owl. So barn owls have a full circular disc. Also the great gray owls, they have a big circular disc of feathers around their face too. And that does help send sound towards their ears. But the great horned owl with these great horns on their heads, these are more for communicating with each other and for displaying to each other. And they can be found all throughout North America. They live in forests, they live in wetlands, deserts. They're very abundant throughout North America and in Maine. You can find them in all kinds of different habitats. They can take down really large prey. They can take down prey even larger than themselves. They've been known to attack other owls, and they'll pick up some mammals that are fairly large, like skunks. So those are some pretty big prey for an owl to take down. But usually they'll eat smaller rodents and small animals. But like I said, they can take down animals as big as other owls, other birds of prey, and skunks. And again, they have that really, really good night vision. They are most active in the evenings. They are nocturnal. And it can be, you can hear these owls at night, especially in the winter and in the fall. They have a very deep sound. Their call is a very deep, almost kind of spooky sound. But they're not looking for scaring us people. They are looking to talk to each other and to find those little mammals to scoop up. We also have barred owls here at the wildlife park. I briefly mentioned barred owls before. So they are a gray colored owl, and they are one of the only owls that have very dark eyes. So most owls have a lighter yellowish eye color, like the great horned owl we just looked at, but barred owls actually have very, very dark eyes, and they have that gray body. And the owls that are here at the park, the barred owls, do have wing injuries, and we believe that is from another vehicle collision, or even it could have been from falling from their nest. And sometimes the barred owls are actually seen during the day. They can be more of a crepuscular animal, so they're not just nocturnal. So if you're driving early in the morning or in the evenings, you might see them perched out on the ends of trees along the road. They do like hunting for rodents along the kind of mowed edges there on like the highways and stuff. But unfortunately, that also means that they're very close to cars that are moving quickly. So unfortunately, they do end up being hit by cars sometimes. Young barred owls and other owlets, that's what baby owls are called, owlets, will climb up the trees by holding on to the bark with their talons, and they flap their wings. So you might be able to find some funny videos online of barred owls doing this. And it's before those babies really know how to fly. So they hold on with those sharp talons to the sides of the trees, and they kind of use their wings for momentum to get up and down until they have the ability to fly confidently. And again, the barred owls are the ones who can sound like they're saying, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" And again, you can find some of those calls online if you want to hear them for yourself. Another owl species that we have here in Maine and here at the wildlife park is the screech owl. Screech owls are very small. They are usually only between 6 and 10 inches tall. And I have a picture of our screech owl here at the park. This is the park screech owl, and I want to point out two very special things. So one is his feathers. They have amazing camouflage. So the screech owl here at the park is more of a gray color. They can either be this gray color, or sometimes they're more red, depending on where they live and their habitat. It is about 1 out of every 3 screech owls are that more red color. That's what we call a morph. So they're the red color morph. So about a third of the screech owls are that red color. And they have amazing camouflage. So this picture, we tried to really capture him. But when you look in the exhibit for this little screech owl, it can be really hard to see him because he's small and his camouflage is so good. You might also notice something special about his eyes. So you can see clearly that he is blind in one eye. So this eye right here, he can't see out of that one. And he's getting very old, so we don't know that he has great eyesight in his other eye either. So he could be close to completely blind. So we take care of him here at the park, and that camouflage is just amazing. So definitely not gonna be able to find them in the wild very easily, especially here in Maine. They are one of our protected species. They are a species of concern. So if you do see one, you're very lucky, and especially with that Awesome camouflage. They're going to be tough to see. All right. And with them being a smaller owl, they're going to eat some smaller prey. So they eat a lot of insects, and they'll sometimes eat like a small rodent or things like lizards and frogs, but they're going to eat a lot of different insects, and they nest in tree cavities. Sometimes they'll even use a nesting box if there's one in a good habitat for them. And people say that their call sounds like a ghost horse. So whatever a ghost horse would sound like. But again, if you want to listen to that, try and find it online and you can figure out what you think it sounds like to you. We also have a barn owl here at the park, and they are another species of special concern here in Maine. Our barn owl here at the park has nerve damage in their wing, so it can't fly very well at all. And that again was from a vehicle collision. They have very, very good eyesight as well. They are mostly nocturnal. They're less active during the day. But they are one of the owls that has some of the best ability to hear. So they have that facial disc that I was talking about. So their feathers on their faces are all kind of directing sound towards their ears. And some owls also have asymmetrically placed ears. So unlike us, our ears are relatively straight across from each other on our eyes. For an owl, they'll have one ear that's placed on one part of their head and one that's on a different part of their head. And this again makes it so they can catch sound coming from different directions a little bit more easily. So barn owls have everything, all the tools for hearing really well. They have the facial discs, they have the asymmetrical ears, and they can hear those frequencies so much better than we can. So really, really good at hunting at night. And we have barn owls in different places around the country, but here in Maine, they are declining due to habitat loss. And in other places in the country, they're declining due to habitat loss. They use very large open meadows for hunting. And large open meadows can also be good for agriculture and for building our houses and for developing for people. So we got to try and protect those special habitats so that these barn owls can stick around longer. And they get their name because they often nest in old barns, but they'll also nest in hollowed out trees. And their call is a very loud, more piercing kind of screech. So it might sound closer to like the sound of a hawk or other birds of prey, or even like eagles sometimes have this screeching kind of sound. So less of a hoot and more of a much higher tone. So I also wanted to look at on our snowy owl here. I'd mentioned before, but let's just look one more time at these feathers. So they're adapted for different habitats. You can tell by this snowy white color that this is a bird that's going to be living in places that most likely have snow. Also, they're named the snowy owl. So different birds have different camouflage for where they're living. So they're going to stand out against the tree that the screech owl might be blending into. And when we also look at the great horned owl, we can see that the textures and patterns, especially if we look on the outside of him, is just like a tree's bark. So they can sit in the tree, especially at night, and you're not gonna be able to see them. But in the day when they're sitting very still and they're being less active, they're not doing as much hunting, it's gonna be really, really hard to see these owls. Awesome camouflage. All right. So I've talked a lot about some different owl adaptations, and I would love to answer any questions that have come in about owls, if we've had any questions.
Yeah, that was a really great presentation. Thank you, Jade. So I've been sitting here watching and commenting with some of you in your comments, and we're going to go ahead and read some of them, but please feel free to write in the chat if you do have some more questions or comments that you'd like to share. So first up, we do have a question about owls and water. They were wondering, can an owl swim? And I said it can be a little bit like a house cat was my hint, but can they swim?
Yeah, so owls are not going to be swimming. They're not well adapted for the water. Um, Birds that are waterfowl, so things like ducks and geese, they have different special adaptations for living in the water. Their feathers are well adapted for that. Owls are not. So they are adapted for living in trees, for flying through the air, for living in forests. And the ones that live in wetlands still are not going to be swimming in the water like a loon or a duck or a goose would. Um, they have different tools in their toolbox for living differently. So they are not going to be swimming in the water like a duck would.
No, they don't like it. Kind of like most house cats don't. They can, but they will be very wet afterwards because of those soft feathers. It'll take them a good while to dry out. But they would be okay, but they don't like it. All right. So there was another question. You talked a lot about different types of owl sounds, and I did share a few links in the chat for places people could go listen to them. But someone was wondering, why does a screech owl sound like that? That kind of like that whinny of a horse, or kind of like a spooky ghost horse.
Yeah, so I don't know why one owl sounds different than another, like specifically, but it is ultimately all about communicating. So just like we have different voices and we have different languages and different ways of talking to each other, that's the same for owls. And it's not always about their voice or the way that they're talking, but it can also be about their hearing. So I said they can hear different frequencies than us. So they hear sound totally in a different way than we do. So that can also affect the way that their hoots or their voices sound because they're hearing it differently also. And they need to be able to communicate also without using their voices. So like I said with the great horned owl and their feathers, owls and other animals too use their body language a lot. Some animals use scent to communicate with each other. So animals communicate in all different ways, just like we have different voices and different ways of communicating with each other. So do the owls.
No, that's really great, and definitely they have a lot of different body postures, especially this time of year when they're nesting. You sometimes see baby owls, perched on a tree while they're waiting for mom or dad to come back, or maybe they fell on the ground and they're making a little posture. I mean, stay back, leave me alone. They're very independent creatures. So another question was in Maine, and I'm not sure if you'll know this one. They're curious about how many different species of owls are there in Maine, and I know that can change throughout the seasons.
Yeah, so we have around 10 to 11 different species of owls. But like Laura mentioned, that changes throughout the season. So, like other birds, owls migrate. So, depending on the season, like in the winter and in the fall, you might see different species of owls than you would in the summer and the spring here in Maine. And we have a couple of owls that you'll see year round, but it depends on the different species. But I think that we usually have about 10 species in the state at different times during the season. And here at the park, I believe we have 4 different species of owls.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, we definitely have about 4 or so that are pretty regularly here, and then we can have up to 10 or so. Some of them are really rare visitors, like the gray and the boreal owls are pretty rare visitors to maybe like northern Maine, and then others are rare for different reasons, like habitat changes. But yeah, lots of different species of owls. So that seems to be it for our questions. I think everyone just really enjoyed the wonderful presentation, so thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all your great questions. If you have more, you can keep sending them in the comments, or you can also send them to us at from mefishwildlife.com, or here at the wildlife park. You can send us your questions and we'll try and answer them the best that we can. And you can look for our other virtual programs coming up on mefishwildlife.com/field trips. And you can also view all of our past recordings and upcoming recordings on our YouTube page. So please check it out. And thank you so much for watching today, and I hope to see you next time.